We have a transitions question. We can see it from a quick vertical scan. We're going to read, as in all of these, read the sentence before the underlined transition and after, get the relationship of ideas, and then try to answer the transition word. So most of the planets have been discovered outside our solar system, orbit G-type stars like our sun. Okay. So most planets are around stars like our sun. In 2014, researchers identified a planet orbiting Kelt 9, a B-type star that is not G, more than twice as massive and nearly twice as hot as the sun. So there was this other planet that was not around a G-type star. It was around some B-type star. So this is in contrast to the first sentence that says most are around G-type, but here's one that was around B-type. So I need contrasting. Not likewise, however. Not therefore, not cause effect, not for example. B, however. Okay, I've got a transition word question. I can see from a quick vertical scan in the question prompt. As in all of these, we want to read the sentence before the underlined and then read the sentence after and get an idea of the relationship of ideas before we pick an answer, and then go to the actual answer choices. So the Babylonian king Hammurabi achieved much during his 40-year reign. He conquered all of Mesopotamia and built Babylon into one of the most powerful cities of the ancient world. So he did a lot, and he built these huge, powerful cities. Today, blank, he is mainly remembered for a code of laws inscribed in a 7-foot-tall block of stone, the Code of Hammurabi. So there's one thing today that he's mainly memorized for, even though he achieved a lot of things. These are contrasting ideas again. So today, not therefore, not likewise. Today, however, he is mainly remembered for a code of laws, not for instance. This is not an example. C is the correct answer. Okay, this is a transition word. I can quickly see from a vertical scan the different transition words. As in all of these, read the first sentence before the underline, then read the second sentence. Get the relationship of ideas between the two, and then use that to find the correct answer, the actual transition word. Some members of the U.S. Supreme Court have resisted calls to televise the court's oral arguments. So kind of like there's C-SPAN for the Congress, the Supreme Court does not want this. That would be bad, according to them, or at least some of them. Concerned that the participants would be tempted to perform for the cameras and thus lower the quality of the discourse. The justices worry that most viewers would not even watch the full deliberations, only short clips that would be misinterpreted and mischaracterized. So this is another concern they have. They're concerned about one, and they worry about two. So these are additive points. They're in agreement. So let's kind of see what would be right. Not however. Additionally, they're worried about one. Additionally, the justices worry that most viewers would not even watch the full deliberation. It's not in comparison. It's not for example. B is the answer. Okay. Definite transition word question. We always want to read the first sentence before the underlined and then the second sentence after the underlined and compare the relationship of ideas. And from that, we're going to figure out which transition word is appropriate. So award-winning travel writer Linda Wannabe McFerrin considers the background research she conducts on destinations featured in her travel books to be its own reward. So the background research, not the result, but the background research is the cool part. McFerrin admits to finding the research phase of her work just as fascinating and engaging as exploring a location in person. So this is in agreement. This is not an example per se, but she considers the background research cool, its own reward, and she admits finding the research phase of her work as engaging or fascinating. So it's not by contrast. Likewise, McFerrin admits, yeah, that could be. Let's keep that. Besides, McFerrin admits, well, besides I do this, besides I do that. I don't think that's right. In fact is emphasis. That's probably going to be our right answer. Likewise, besides, not quite, not a comparison, not, beside or next to. It's in fact, McFerrin considers the background research cool. In fact, she admits to finding the research phase fascinating. Yeah, I think that's right. We're emphasizing the previous sentence. D is the right answer. Okay, we've got a transition word, just looking at the answer choices on a vertical scan and looking at the prompt. So, as always, I'm going to read the first sentence before the underline, read the second sentence, try to identify the relationship of ideas. And from that, I'm going to pick out the right transition word. So, 1873, Spanish scientist Santiago Ramon Cajal observed that brain fibers have distinct boundaries with clear endpoints, a finding that went against earlier assumptions about the brain. Scientists had assumed that the brain was a continuous web of fused fibers, not a vast network of distinct individual cells. So he observed that they were this way. Previously or beforehand, they thought it was that way. Previously, I guess. And well, sure enough, there is previously. I didn't really check the answers beforehand, but that's going to be it. It's not contrasting. Let's just check that because they are different ideas. This guy observed brain fibers are like this, which is against earlier assumptions. However, scientists had assumed, no, that's not right. Okay. And it's not cause effect. It's not as a result, and it's not comparison. It's previous. It's a, chronological or sequential issue here. He observed the brain fibers are this way. That went against the previous assumptions. Previously, now we're going to say what those assumptions were. Previously, scientists had assumed the brain was a web of fibers, not a vast network like Cajal said they are today. B is the answer. Okay, this is a transition word question. I'm going to, as typically, read the first sentence before the underline, read the second sentence after the underline, and try to figure out the relationship of ideas. Remember, there are only about half a dozen to a dozen core relationships of ideas, right? Comparing, contrasting, sequential, chronological, additive, cause effect, illustrative for examples, emphasis. I probably missed a few, but that's a good start. And then they're related or associated transition words for each of those. So for years, biologists have experimented with using grime-eating bacteria rather than harsh chemicals to clean artworks, and results have been impressive overall. So they've used bacteria rather than chemicals. No chemicals bad, bacteria good, and it's worked. Okay. These bacterial strains, which can metabolize centuries worth of oil, glue, dirt, and other surface impurities without creating harmful byproducts, have proven more effective than traditional chemical cleaning methods. So this is emphasizing the point, right? It's not an additive point, but it's continuing the point that for years they've used bacteria, not chemicals, with good results. And they kind of explain these results. They can metabolize such and such, and that's proven more effective than traditional chemical. So, however, it's not contrasting. In many cases, these bacterial strains, which can metabolize centuries worth, have proven more effective. Okay, that definitely could be as a result. So, wait, is the second sentence a result of the first? No, the first sentence just says they're impressive overall results. The second is not a cause effect as a result. Additionally, these bacteria, so is this an additive point? They use bacteria, not chemicals, with good results. As an additive point, these bacteria, have proven more effective. No, I think it's in many cases. In many cases, these bacterial strains and what they do have proven more effective than traditional chemical cleaning methods. It's not additionally. This is not a separate additional point. It's the same idea, and we're just saying in many cases, this is what they do and why they prove more effective. B. Okay, we've got transition question. I noticed some unusual transition clues like that is and granted. Note these appear often on the new exam. Okay? So granted is kind of like, yes, that's true, but kind of that's not the most important thing. And that is kind of almost like in other words a little bit, or regardless, you do this. That is, I do such and such. Regardless, I do such and such. Let's take a look. We want to, as always, read the sentence before the underline, read the sentence after, identify the relationship of ideas. Alexander Lawrence Posey varied his focus and tone depending on the genre in which he was writing. In his poetry, he used heartfelt language to evoke beauty, peace of his natural surroundings. In his journalism, by contrast, he employed humor. So he evoked beauty and peace, and by contrast, in this other genre, he employed humor and satire to comment on political issues. That might be it. Similarly, in journalism, no, it's not the same thing that he's employing. In journalism, granted, but that's not really important. He employed, no, that's not the right idea. In journalism, that is, no, that wouldn't be right either. By contrast, D is going to be the correct answer for 7. Okay, we've got transitions and various transition words. First, we're going to read the sentences, identify the relationships, and then we'll try to pick the transition word. So, such and such poem, Song of Luino, explores post-colonial Ugandan life through the eyes of a woman living in a natural village. With its vibrant imagery, bitingly satiric tone, and dexterous use of traditional Alkoli song phraseology, the poem inspired a generation of East African writers. Those who adopted its style are often referred to as Okot school poets. I would say this is probably as a result. It describes all the Ugandan poets' style and everything, and then as a result, those who adopted the style. So let's see. Nevertheless, those who adopted, no, it's not contrasting. Fittingly, that's appropriate. So that's not quite cause and effect, but it's appropriately or fittingly those who adopted style or that definitely could be. In fact, it probably will be the answer. By comparison, we're not comparing those who adopted the style of Okot versus Okot. Instead, no, this is not an alternative. As an alternative, no, that's not right. It's going to be fittingly. Not exactly my original guess, but an appropriate idea. No pun intended, because fittingly means appropriately. That's the answer. All right, another transition question. Look at all the transitions, just a quick scan. So I'm not going to go through them in detail. I'm going to read the first sentence before the underlined, and then the second sentence after the underlined. And I want to assess for myself what I think the relationship of ideas is. And then I'll try to pick out which transition word or phrase. Because a chiral molecule is symmetrical, flipping it yields a structurally identical molecule. A flipped chiral molecule can be compared to a glove that has been turned inside out. It produces a structurally inverted molecule rather than an identical one. So chiral is symmetrical, flipping it yields a structurally identical. A flipped chiral is not just symmetrical. So a flipped chiral molecule, I'm not sure what I guess. Flipped chiral molecule also can be compared to a glove. I probably need to check the answer choice because I don't have an obvious fit here, I think, that I can think of the word for. A flipped chiral, you probably do if you're listening to this. A flipped chiral molecule, in other words, can be compared to a glove. This might be because it's trying to say, in other words, a simple example that the reader might understand. I'm going to hold on to that for a second. Let's keep checking. A flipped chiral molecule, by contrast, no, we're kind of showing how it works. We wouldn't be contrasting. A flipped chiral molecule, for example. No, we're doing a general comparison and explanation. It's not an example. A flipped chiral molecule similarly can be compared to a glove. So a chiral molecule is symmetrical, flipping yields structurally identical. A flipped chiral molecule similarly can be compared. No, it's not similarly can be compared. I think it's in other words. In other words, to clarify, it can be compared to a glove that's been turned inside out. I think the answer correctly is A. Okay, another transitions. See the transition words. Again, we've got this new one, granted, appears a lot. And I'm not going to go through the individual transition words. I'm going to read the first sentence before the underline, and then the second sentence, and try and assess the idea, the relationship of ideas here. Is it comparing, contrasting, cause effect, illustrative examples, additional information, what's going on? Okay. And then I'll pick my right transition word or phrase. So Jhumpa Lahiri's story collection, Interpreter of Maladies, features multiple stories about romantic relationships. In this blessed house, newlyweds argue over whether to replace items left by the previous owners of their new home. In a temporary matter, a husband and wife attempt to rekindle their relationship during a 4-night blackout. So what's he doing? He's got a collection, and it features multiple stories about romance and romantic relationships. So these are different stories. This is one example of a story. This is another example of a story. So this blessed house, the first example, argues something about whether these romantically involved people should replace items or not. Also, no, or secondly, maybe sequentially, secondly, in a temporary manner, a husband and wife try to rekindle after a blackout. So, granted, likewise. These are similar examples of how couples behave in romantic relationships. It's a comparison. It's showing the sameness. This blessed is a newlyweds argue. Likewise, that is very similarly, this other one is a husband and wife trying to put their relationship back together. Not granted. It's not for example, because they're both examples of the general maladies, the multiple stories. And it's not hence, it's not cause effect, it's likewise. C is the answer.